how to identify a successful NFT collection. And I think, at least I know speaking to these gents off stage, these principles don't just apply to NFT, they apply to investing full stop. So, introducing up on stage, we have everyone with us, minus one. So, we have Vikram, Gary, and Joe. A round of applause as we welcome them on stage.
Hi everyone, it's great to be here. My name is Gary. I'm a risk manager in real life. So just a little bit of background on me, my introduction, how I got into crypto. I started off probably with the main three, or at least the main two, Bitcoin and Ethereum. Ventured into Cardano, found Charles Hoskinson's whiteboard video, and kind of went down the rabbit hole. So my experience with NFTs is mainly on Cardano. But I have ventured across into Ethereum as well. And just talking about the topic that we've got, I'll expand on that in a minute, but I'll just pass over to gentleman here to introduce himself.
Sure. Hi, guys. I'm Joe. So I'm probably best described as a software engineer who realized early on in his career he wasn't very good, so had to do something different with his life. Made a couple of companies, and it was quite a fun ride over the course of the last 10 years. So built a marketplace for work. We bootstrapped that to a $1 billion IPO in under 4 years, and then made a company in the UK creating electric vehicle technology, which we took to market last year, which was quite good and successful as well at a few billion. So that enabled me to do lots of other things, look at investing, look at new technology, which brings me here today.
Hi, good morning, everyone. My name is Vikram. I'm a lawyer, senior partner at Gibraltar's largest and leading law firm. I also am involved in building a security infrastructure project for Web3 and a very avid NFT collector. Bored Ape Yacht Club group, the whole Yuga Labs ecosystem, Artifact, and Curio cards, and those will touch into some of the aspects that we discussed today.
Perfect, thank you. So just to kick off then, what makes an NFT collection successful? $1 million question. A lot of different variables. We're discussing it off stage. We could probably talk here for 3-4 hours on the various different topics. We'll try and narrow it down and touch on some topics, but generally it's what's the definition of success? Is it based off of a founder of a project? Is it an investor? Is it a flipper? What is your project? What's the utility? What's your roadmap? Are you an art project? Are you building a metaverse? Are you building a game? If it's an art project, is it just purely to sell out? Is that what's successful? If it's a metaverse, is it getting the users involved in that metaverse and actually not only there from day one, is it actually keeping there, staying there, building in the metaverse? Other topics around what is it you want from your community? Do you want a distribution for a 10K collection to be 5,000 users, 5,000 wallets? Various things. I think there's so many different definitions of success that we could go around and talk a lot, but some of the key things I think we're going to talk about here today is from our own perspective, what do we think makes a successful NFT collection? My own personal view, based on obviously being involved in Cardano, first and foremost is I think the founders of the project, do they know their why? Why are they in the scene? What is their project doing? What are they trying to build? But after that, do they have the right people involved to deliver that? So if they've got a roadmap, is it quite strict in terms of they've got all these times that they want to deliver something and it's almost like a checklist that they have to get there? Or is it a roadmap where they can actually pivot and they can provide certain information to their community, communicate with them, get feedback, and actually be able to move off that roadmap and deliver it? But also community. The community is obviously your most valuable asset to making a collection successful. So I suppose the biggest NFT collection from my perspective in Cardano, probably don't know there are NFTs on Cardano, but it's Claymates. So that's a pretty big NFT collection. I was lucky enough to get involved in them very early on when there were no marketplaces on Cardano, there were no smart contracts. So I was saying to the gents earlier that in order to actually trade an NFT, you had to speak to someone in Discord. It might take 2 or 3 days to agree on the trade and go to an escrow and do it via that way. But yeah, no, I found Claymates. They had 300 people on Twitter, 300 people on the Discord, just having general conversations. They've done a few hundred piece drops, built up slowly and surely, did a 10K drop, and they've announced collaborations with Snoop Dogg, Champ Medici, Good Charlotte, etc. So I was lucky enough to be a moderator and escrow and working closely with them over the last 12, 14 months. So from my perspective, those I would class as a very successful project on Cardano, and they've ticked all of the criteria that I would say really solid founders. I've met them in person and provided them with, from my risk management perspective, the questions that I want to know, and they've ticked those boxes. So yeah, from my perspective, that would be what I would class as a successful NFT collection in a generic perspective. Over to you, Joe.
I mean, look, I can be the arsehole in the room and say money, because that certainly helps. And look, it is why a lot of people get into this as well, but also you're going to hear about social value, you're going to hear about communities, you're going to hear about cultural aspects of things as well, or just the experience of doing anything in a new technology as well. And look, you know, it is the ultimate question, and we're not going to give you the ultimate answer, unfortunately, after the end of this, but ideas around potentially what to do for the future, because I don't want to be too cynical about things at all, but also it's kind of the Wild West for this technology right now, which breeds so much opportunity, it's kind of crazy. And if you look at the majority of collections right now, it's very hard to find people that are doing anything dramatically different. 2022 has been a crazy, wild year for pretty much everyone, I think, in a variety of different ways. And if you made any investments, you know, you'd be lucky to break even now. But there's the age-old understanding of if you do the same thing as everyone else and expect a different result, that's the definition of insanity. So should you try and copy Bored Ape? Is that just going to add more value to Bored Ape? We have a situation now where we're in a really exciting phase of a new technology, and most new technologies, if you look back over history, they stutter with their success initially. But the understanding of the potential, and especially the utility behind NFT technology, is phenomenal. If you look at it, I was saying to the guys, I'm kind of getting on in my age now, and I very much remember the first few smartphones, the first few apps we started to use, and the initial apps I look at kind of NFTs at the moment, essentially, where it was a very shallow experience. So I don't know if anyone remembers iBeer, which basically replicated drinking a pint of beer on your phone. It was stupid, it was silly, it was shallow, but everyone had it, everyone enjoyed it because it was new. And everyone saw the ability of what that technology could do. And in a few years' time, we know we're living our lives on those apps. So I look at that as the same thing as NFTs at the moment. And what's going to make them successful, going back to it's the Wild West side of things right now, is experimentation. There's going to be a lot of smart people doing a lot of crazy smart things over the next few years. Hopefully, I can be one of them. Maybe not. I don't know. Hopefully, I can support people that do that as well. So it's about, I think about thinking very, very differently. There's a momentous action right now from a lot of brands experimenting in lots of different ways as well with what they do with their physical products, obviously relating that to NFTs. I'm not going to describe that because I think everyone's kind of seen that so far. There's a few really good success stories recently. Everyone's been talking yesterday mainly about what Reddit's done recently, which has onboarded so many people into this technology. But then it's kind of interesting because the way that they did that is not really tell people what they were doing. So is that actually successful, or is that, you know, we should all be ashamed of ourselves that the only way we can convince people to do this right now is by almost faking or not being descriptive in what's happening. So the topic of this talk today is kind of mind-blowing in its breadth of different answers, and hopefully we can try and understand a bit of that now, because we're all thinking the same thing. And I think that's why everyone's here today as well, to understand what we should be doing over the course of the next few months and years, how we should be taking advantage of this. And experimentation in every means necessary is what I would very much advise. The specifics of that, I can go on for ages, but I've spoken quite a bit without actually saying anything of substance so far. But I'm trying to kind of set the conversation tone because it is such an interesting but wild subject as far as what suggestions could be. And yes, what success is as well is very much the situation. But when it comes to success, most people, if we're honest about ourselves, are talking about things from a monetary value. And there's some really good understanding and good ideas of different organizations that are starting to actually do this incredibly well. Not necessarily now, but putting things in place. So over the next few months and years, they're going to be first to market and first movers to actually take advantage of this, considering what their customers and their users and the purchasers of brands are doing as well. So it's fun times. Vikram, I don't know, is that something to hand off to you now as far as anything more specific than that?
Yeah, Joe, you've covered a lot of ground. You've covered a lot of ground. It's helpful, I think, to just bring it back and slightly narrow the scope. So firstly, we're all here. We're all early in the NFT space. That's something to recognize. Why are we here? This is an investment track. So, of course, there is a financial motivation to being present. But there is also an entrepreneurial element as well. So I don't know how many of you, we certainly are involved in building, but there are a number of people here at this conference who are involved in building for Web3. And we need to recognize the NFT technology and the part that that plays in continuing to build. So, Gary, you mentioned that this is, there are many different perspectives that we can look at when we talk about success. So we can look at success from the NFT founder's perspective, and in that, there are so many different metrics. We can look at it from the flipper's perspective, what is the multiple return that someone can make. But if we look at it from a community perspective, that's when you talk about culture, that's when you talk about the application of the technology. And community, not only the community within that particular NFT project, but broader community, society. What is the impact of that technology? And is that a measure of success? But bringing it back to the fact that we are here on an investment track, we should also look at the projects themselves from an investment perspective. This is an investment track. So as with any investment, not only NFTs, when you start your journey, you have an investment thesis and you have an investment time horizon. So time is probably the most relevant aspect when it comes to making an investment. And your investment thesis considers things like your risk appetite, your disposable income, your available capital, what your investment objectives are. So any prudent investor will have in mind all of these different aspects, as well as their own psychology. So a successful investor will always study their own psychology, and will also look at the market. Where is the market? What time in the market cycle are you looking to enter? Some might say we're in a bear market. Some might say this is the most opportune time to enter. But it's also a dangerous time. And therefore, if you are entering the market now, or you've been in the market and are looking to deploy capital, what should you be looking for? And this is where we talk about blue chip projects. So, of course, you've got your Bored Apes, you've got your whole Yuga Labs ecosystem, your CryptoPunks, your apes, and so on. And if you look at that ecosystem, Yuga Labs are building a game, right? And gaming is a massive sector in the conventional sense. So if you're an investor, you can invest in games, you can invest in companies that produce games, you can invest in tokens that are involved in that whole universe of gaming. There are so many different aspects to that, and therefore Yuga Labs are involved in that sector. If you look at another blue chip project like Artifact, they're owned 100% by Nike, And that itself lends a lot of credibility, but it also shows the direction of travel for the technology where, Gary, you've already spoken about, your fidgetals. We don't like that word, but where physical and digital intersect, and how companies are deploying the technology in that aspect. And that is certainly part of an investment thesis. Yeah. You have NFTs being used for token gating. So if you're attending the CloneX dinner tonight, then you've already signed in, got your digital pass to attend that dinner tonight. There's so many different applications for it, and then we shouldn't forget intellectual property rights. That's something I think we can come back to as well. But I think I've said enough, and I'm going to hand over because that's a lot of ground. And we did say that there is a lot that we can talk about. We can talk about this for hours. We can talk about the investment aspects, we can talk about the blue chip aspects, we can talk about it from a founder's perspective, but let me not be too greedy with the time and hand over.
But can you not just, to conclude what you were just saying, if you take it back to its basics from an investment point of view, a successful NFT collection means demand outstrips supply. And that's it, basically. And that should be a overall definition of success. So how do you enable that? That's the kind of big question, because that then covers a variety of topics.
We're getting into macroeconomics, because
Yes.
that is true of every single economy. As long as you have demand which outstrips supply, and central bankers will say this is a nightmare. We've got overheating economies and inflation. Now we're all experts in macroeconomics because we're studying that and the impact it has on crypto and NFTs, right? But that's true. As long as an NFT project is producing value, and therefore creating that demand, there is a limited supply. That supply can increase through airdrops. Is that a measure of success? If you look at Artifact, they've airdropped a median salary every 6 months to their holders. That's a fantastic measure of success. And that gift horse keeps on coming.
In very simple terms, if the project benefits both the investor and the founder, successful. Just curious with time, just with a show of hands, does anyone have any questions they'd like to ask before we sort of move on? So I can allow time to ask any questions. No, perfect, that's fine. So just a topic that I wanted to discuss coming on to this is very topical at the moment, and it's around sort of VC funding. How do you view that in the whole NFT scene at the moment?
I mean, I represent a fund myself, and this is where things get, I think, really interesting, because for NFTs might be the first time in history I've seen negative reactions to anyone getting funding in this area, which is kind of crazy. But what's, I think, interesting about stuff that I've experienced myself is that I've bootstrapped a business and I've built a business after being funded, and the two things are incredibly different, opposite ends of the scale. When it's your own money, you act incredibly differently to when it's someone else's money, even if you're acting on behalf of that organization, that fund, or anything like this. It's in simple terms, it's like when you play poker, and you play poker either using your own cash or you play using some crisps or something, or whatever you have, or matchsticks or something like that. You don't care when it's matchsticks. You go all in, it doesn't really matter. But when it's your own cash, it's very, very different. And so the right sorts of people getting funded right now, they understand that. And that's something I certainly look for when talking to anyone. And we have conversations with different funds all the time as well, understanding what their priority is. And it's always money. You can't get away from that. Venture capitalists are venture capitalists. They want to make quick returns on investments if possible. And they want to give you term sheets that are certainly going to look after themselves more than anyone else as well, and that's something to pay attention to. There's massive stories in the media constantly of companies getting funded in the Web3 space, in NFTs as well. Sometimes we're seeing now people getting funded when they haven't even built a product as yet, don't have an MVP, don't have a scaling user numbers or monetary value as yet, which is insanity, but that shows the opportunity as well. And that's something for everyone to really get excited about, I think. But when you have this community feel, when you have this culture around technology, which hasn't happened too much in the past, that's when you hook into emotion. and that can drive success rather than pure funding. And there's a bit of a contradiction, and this is where maybe where I understand if a community reacts badly to getting funded, it's almost like selling out a little bit, or we want to build this ourselves. We want to be responsible for ourselves, and then hopefully we see the benefit of this ourselves as well. And so that's something really important to think about that's different specifically with NFTs at this point in time. But anyone who's kind of looking, at funding right now, understands that it's quite hard to bootstrap, and it only goes so far. But that's also the beauty of NFTs. It's comparatively to a lot of other industries, it's not that expensive to get into and to start and get up and running. But how do you hook in to that growth? How do you hook into the communities? And how do you hook into the successful culture, which is what the typical traditional NFTs have done so far. And what I said when I first started talking was do the exact opposite and experiment constantly, which then, when you look at it from a funding perspective, is quite a risky approach if you're talking to people that are looking to give you money as well. So it's to kind of answer your I guess initial question. The landscape right now with funding NFT projects is all over the place. And it's about coming to events like this. It's about taking in advice, but it's just about meeting every single person that you can, talking to every single person that you can, and relating to every single person that you can as well. Because I've just seen, even yesterday I was at the NFT NYC event, and there was so many good connections that have come up, that have sprung up, and that I've seen be successful since that event happened in this summer, as well. So, maybe that's happening again today. But avoid it if you can, and if you can't, be smart about the contracts and the term sheets that you sign. And I hope I'm not going to offend anyone here. No one really likes lawyers, but it's the one time when you really need to get a decent lawyer behind you to understand what those deals actually mean.
Good thing we've got one on stage, right?
Joe, thanks for the plug. Thanks. Those were all valid comments, especially the one about needing a good lawyer. Kidding. Look, Gary, that's a good question, and it comes back to perspective. So just framing it, in the context of our panel question, which is what makes a successful NFT collection. When you talk about VC funding, there's, especially in the NFT space, which is based on Web3 values. That's sharing, value creation, and value contribution with the community. Yeah. There is an inherent tension between those ideals and VC funding, at least at the outset and at least on the surface. And it's something that's got to be very carefully managed by the project team, because you've seen time and time again, there was a bit of an uproar in the Moonbirds community when there was recognition that VC funding had come in. That certainly ruffled some feathers, forgive the pun. But you can see the value that VC funding brings, because it allows the project team to grow and to hopefully deliver more value for the community. And if that is done in the right way and it continues to enable the Web3 community values, then I think that is a good measure of success. But it's something that's got to be very carefully managed, because you've got the interests of the VC that need to be considered. And as long as that tension between the VC, the project team, and the community, and we're really talking about a conflict of interest, as long as that conflict of interest can be declared and properly managed with the right outcomes, I think that's a really narrow path, but a very potentially successful path.
Just on that topic, the reason I raised the question is because I see it almost as a sandwich. And if you're a founder of a project, you need to be very careful if you're going to look to be getting VC funding, because you've not only got the expectations of your community now, you've got the expectations of the VC, and you've got to be able to provide for both. So from a risk perspective in particular, you need to be conscious of that you've got almost two categories of people that you need to provide utility, return, success to, and you've got to be able to deal with that. So getting VC funding is great from the perspective of, yes, you've got that funding to support whatever it is you're trying to build, but be conscious it comes at a price as well, that you've not only got to provide it to your investors, to the community, you've got to provide it to the VC. So yeah.
It's pretty much going back to the Web 2 world. Yeah.
Exactly. Almost running out of time. Coming up, just any other questions, if there is anything from anyone? Again, yes, hi there.
We'll repeat the question.
So in order to be successful, is that a requirement, basically?
So the question was, does it matter the actual fund that backs you, the reputation of that fund? Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I gotcha. And no, look, it's about who you know. It's a very incestuous industry, and if you're backed by A16Z or Sequoia or someone like that, you know, you're having good times, you're having good discussions, you're getting some really good advice as well, and that's going to make a difference to your community and the people that support you and the people that take notice of you as well. So I'm building something right now called nextbase.io. Please, everyone go to it. It's absolutely phenomenal. It's a gorgeous experience. But we're looking at a lot of some really interesting organizations at our kind of stage and age, and we're looking at who's backing them, because that is genuinely a measure of success, not just in the advice that they're getting, the support they're getting, the money and how it's going to be released to them as well, because that's a big thing too. But also about how the community is going to react to that and how users are going to react to that. And if you can get good reputation of individuals backing you as well, then that's absolutely huge, as well as funds. And on stage before us, someone was talking about good influencers backing you, and mentioned Kanye, and it's up and down with reputation and other stuff as well. And that's the same with funding as well. So yes is the answer to your question. The right sorts of people, you got to stay on top of things and keep researching and just hammer down doors constantly until you get answers. Never give up.
Yeah, I would 100% agree. It comes to trust. Yeah, I mean, blockchain makes everything trustless. When you come to any sort of business, any sort of investment, it's there is always an element of credibility which is based on trust. And if you have a recognized fund or a recognized brand or an institution that has trusted you with their reputation, with their money, with their community, then that builds instant credibility. So I think the answer is yes, but I would caveat that by saying it's not a prerequisite. So you can definitely build grassroots support and build success from grassroots, but it's a much harder journey. It may be eventually a more successful journey, and you certainly avoid some of the other challenges that we talked about earlier. When it comes to conflict of interest between VCs, shareholders, and your Web3 values. And let's not forget, Web3 values are going to play an ever-increasing part in how society moves forward and how we see the value creation and value distribution. And we're all here because that's important to us. So that's something we shouldn't forget.
Also, if you look at any accelerators, go to ones where the people have actually had some success. There's many around right now that they haven't actually got a lot of substance to their background. And so the advice that they're going to give you, is it going to be good or not? So that can be a really good, because I mentioned the incestuous industry that we're in. Everyone's one or two connections away from everyone else, and everyone can kind of introduce you. So if you're backed by getting advice from the right people as well, that's a really good way to go.
But that was a great question. Thank you. Are there any other questions?
Perfect. Looks like that wraps up our time. You've got our details, hopefully LinkedIn, Twitter. Feel free to reach out to us. Hopefully it didn't provide you with the $1 million answer that you were looking for, but hopefully there was some good perspectives. But yeah, thank you for the other guys for doing it as well.
No, thank you.
Thank you very much.
And thank you all.